Hey everyone, this is Philip Anthony, and welcome to Millionaire College Planner, your place to achieve seven-figure status as a college planner. I'm pumped up, I'm excited because I'm going to be teaching you perhaps one of the most profitable skills that you can learn, which is understanding the psychology behind what makes a prospect have the desire to not hire you. In other words, what is holding them back? And then how do we persuasively overcome these objections to get them to come to the decision that hiring you is the right one? Now, in order to understand how to overcome an objection, we need to first define what an objection is. Now, what I'm going to argue is that an objection is nothing more than a resistance towards taking an action. In this case, the action is to hiring you. In other persuasive communication lessons, I've talked about resistance towards wanting to take a particular decision with you or towards wanting to do anything for that matter. But in this case, we're talking about just the topic of buying. Now, if objections are really just resistance, and the question is, well, what are the resistance characteristics that cause a prospect to not want to give you money? And there's a whole bunch. There's, in fact, dozens that we can talk about, and a lot of them share similarities with other industries. There's a lot of crossovers, but for our purposes, we're going to talk about the top 5 objections or resistance or reasons for resistance that prospects have when it comes to hiring you for college planning. And the first one's going to be likability as an objection. Number 2 is believing your service has value. Number 3, urgency. Number 4, the objection of money. Number 5 is the objection of authority and whether or not they have the decision to make on the spot. So before I get into these specific objections, your first task as a master persuader is going to be to ascertain whether or not the objection your prospect tells you in your consultation is the true objection or if it's literally just a cover. In other words, they're not telling you the truth. And so when you're doing your consultations, for instance, you might be talking to the wife and you'll say, "So Susan, what do you think about the program at my company and whether or not it can help you?" And Susan might say, "Oh, everything's great, but we just don't have enough money right now. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to pass." And what's interesting is having coached so many college planners, what I can tell you is that very often or not, when I ask what's the number one objection that prospects give you, they always say money, they can't afford it. And then they always devalue their program. You reduce your price or break it up into installments over 10 years in order to make it affordable. When in reality, that prospect's lying to you. They have the money, they can find the money if they don't have it, but they choose to tell you that because they have been taught from a social standpoint that that is a great way to convince a salesperson to back off. So what you have to do is first isolate the real objection before you can overcome the objection itself. So the way you isolate an objection or determine its authenticity is when you're talking to your prospects. And so let's go back to Susan. So I say, "Hey Susan, what do you think about the program? Is this something that would help your daughter?" And she says, "Hey, you know what, Philip, the program sounds fantastic. I like everything about it, but we just don't have any money." So the way a master persuader would handle that particular objection is first we need to isolate whether or not it's the real one. So I'll say, "Susan, I completely understand money can be tight in the situations like this. So just if I understand, if I can make your money situation work, if I could figure out how to make the price or the program work within your budget, is this something that you would want to move forward on?" Boom. And the reason why I ask that question is it makes her make an immediate response that will tell me whether or not she's telling the truth. And one of two things are going to happen. And number one is she'll either say, "Yes, absolutely. If you can make it work within my price, I definitely want to do it, Philip." Well, then now I know that that was the real truthful objection. And all I have to do is honestly and hopefully in a way that's a win-win, restructure the price so it does work within her budget. Now, if she says on the other hand, "Oh, well, the price, it's not just the price, Philip. It's my daughter. She's just not motivated." Or it's not just the price, Philip. We have a cousin that can help us through the process. Or Philip, it's not just the price, but how long you been in business? So in other words, so by asking her that question, it's going to immediately tell me whether she's telling me the truth or if there's another objection. And what you can also do is look at nonverbals. Nonverbals in one's physiology is also a tell to whether they're telling the truth. Poker players do this all the time. Narcotic detectives do this a lot, where when they're interviewing or when they're interrogating a subject, They're going to ask the question, and the answer is less important than the nonverbals: rapid eye movement, dilation of the pupils, looking around, touching their skin. All these abnormalities in their physiology will subcommunicate deceit. And that deceit is the information necessary for you as a persuader to get into their head and figure out the truth so that you can overcome that truth. So let's go ahead and assume here that Susan told me, she said, hey, you know what, Philip, price is not the real reason. Or she'll say, no, price is the reason, but she's moving around, her eyes are looking around, she doesn't look comfortable, so she's lying to me. So then here's what you'll do in that situation so that you can figure out the real objection. Is then what you want to do is you want to say, you know what, Susan, I'm going to be completely honest with you. The number one thing that I want to do is make sure that your daughter has the best possible outcome in the process, meaning that she gets into her dream college and she gets into the college at a price that's affordable. But for me to do that, I really just want to make sure that I'm helping you. And if you don't want to do it, I completely understand. But more importantly, is there anything else that maybe you don't feel comfortable telling me about maybe why this program might not be a good fit for you? And by the way, it's okay if you decide that you want to say no. And so I'm giving her permission to say no, but I'm probing deeper and I'm getting to a level of authenticity in the communication, and something miraculous is going to happen. Is what she'll do is Susan will look at me and she will say to me, Philip, the real reason, just to be honest with you, the real reason is my husband just doesn't want to do it. I can tell you right now, he won't go for it. Or what she'll say is, Philip, my daughter's just not motivated. Or, Philip, I just don't think this is necessary right now. And now you have the real objection. Now you have a real conversation. And now we can talk about how are the ways to overcome these real objections. So again, before we talk about how to overcome an objection, your first step is to isolate the real objection by at first clarifying that objection, saying, if I were to overcome this objection for you, if I were to do this for you, is this something that you would want to do right now? And if they say yes, and if it's the real objection, then now you overcome that objection. And if it's not the real objection, you ask those clarifying questions, you show authenticity, and you ask them to be honest with you. And I guarantee you 100% of the time they will, in fact, then tell you the truth. Now, let's say they go ahead, and now you're at that point where they told you the truth. Now, there's so many objections that I don't have time to get into, and if you want my full comprehensive objection training, then you need to invest in Millionaire College Planning Coaching. But I'm going to tell you the top 5 that I hear most often from my emails and phone calls and coaching sessions with my college planners. The first one is the objection of likability. They don't like you. Number 2 is believability. They don't believe in what you have to sell. They don't believe there's value in what you're offering. Number 3 is the objection of urgency. In other words, they think there's value, but they don't believe that the value is sufficient for them to get started right now. They want to wait till next year. Number 4 is the objection, of course, of money. So let's assume here money is the real objection. And then number 5, it's the objection of making this decision. They cannot make a decision because they don't have all the right people in that consultation at that moment. So let's talk about each one for a second. So the first one is the objection of liking you. Okay, this is really important. Is in sales and in persuasion, if you don't have likability established at the very beginning, it's very hard, because sales is a game of trust, and trust requires rapport, and rapport is a consequence of likability. And so therefore, if you're not liked, you're not going to be trusted. So let's talk about how to get liked. Well, there's 3 ways that we can deconstruct the concept of likability and to engineer it within your consultations. The first one is empathy, the second one is jokes, and the third one is shared values and beliefs. So you use empathy to create likability. So what this means to you is you show sincere empathy for the prospect. I understand, Susan, what you're going through. That must be so tough for you as a single mom going through this process. I don't know how you do it. Let me tell you a story of a family I worked with who was in a situation just like yours, and how hard it was, and what I managed to do for that person in order to make the situation better. Show empathy. And empathy is different than sympathy, where sympathy is when you can't help them because you feel sorry for them. Empathy is when you logically understand the situation, you show proactive compassion for them, but you disassociate yourself from that person so that you can get the deal to close. So again, showing empathy is very important. Jokes, right? I always have standard jokes that I always practice, and I use them. I use them in my seminars. I use them in my consultations. I'll give you an example. I'm in a consultation, and the prospect might say, "So, what did you major in, Philip, when you're in college?" And the very first thing I'll say is, "Well, that's a funny question that you asked. That when I was in college, I first wanted to major in political science because I thought I wanted to be a politician until I met a politician and I changed my mind." And they always go, "Oh, ha 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 ha," right? And I always deliver it well. And the reason why I do that is because what science shows is that the more you laugh, then the better you feel, and then those positive feelings get anchored towards you, which helps create rapport, which helps create likability. The third way you can create likability is by demonstrating shared values and beliefs. So, for instance, you do the consultation. Let's say the mom is very interested and engaged, but you look at the husband. He's sitting back. His arms are crossed. He's not looking directly at you. He's looking off in the corner. Obviously, he doesn't like you. He doesn't trust you, and he's not going to buy in that type of physiology. So what I'll immediately do is I'll ask him a question. I'll say, "Hey, John, what do you think about the college planning process? So what do you think about your daughter going to XYZ school?" And then he'll immediately say, "Oh, well, I told her she needs to go to a community college because a community college is more affordable, and that's what I did when I grew up in the process back in 1807, or whatever he whatever he wants to say." And so immediately what I'm going to do is, even though that way of thinking is actually counter to our value proposition of making these schools affordable for parents, I'm going to agree with that because it creates likability, which is necessary for him to trust my statements that will be introduced later on in the consultation to make him believe in a private college education if that's the direction I want him to go. So the way I'll implement that is I'll simply say, "Hey, John, that's a great point. You know what? A community college might be a good decision for her. In fact, I have a lot of students who I recommend community college because either they're not ready, or because given the grades they're not going to get enough money at the private schools and at the top public schools. So maybe community college is best." And in fact, I'm very happy you brought that up into this conversation, because as a family, the most important thing is that everyone is making the right decision, but we're doing it together. Wouldn't you agree? And then immediately he's going to say yes. And I've already got him to like me a little bit more because I'm agreeing with his value. I'm agreeing with his belief systems, right? So that's what we do in persuasion, is you create that likability by showing empathy, jokes, shared values and beliefs. And by doing so, you'll overcome the objection of, "I don't like this person, therefore I don't want to work with that person." Number two, believing in your services as far as having value. Now, this is a tough one because oftentimes prospects might say, "You know what? I believe in your service, but I just don't believe it's worth what you want financially," right? So before I get into pricing, when we talk about just the question of value, think about what we learn in persuasion. If you study my other programs, I've talked about something called metadata, right? Metadata is 2 points on a spectrum on how people create actions based off of their internal representations of what things mean. So people move in two directions, towards pleasure or away from pain, right? So here's what we're going to do is we need to first understand what direction that your prospect moves in. If they move towards pleasure, then there's a way that you can build value in your program by talking about its pleasurable benefits in a way consistent with their value. So you might say, "Hey, you know what, Christy, this is such a great program for you. It's going to really help you get your daughter into her dream school. And what I'll also be able to do is make sure that she really has fun and she enjoys her college education, and that she can not only get educated but have these growing, amazing experiences while she's there, because I'm speaking to Christy's value systems and I'm building pleasure for her, and that's building value in the program." Now, in contrast, let's say I'm talking to her husband, John, and John is motivated towards pain. Well, the way I build value in my program for him is I'm not going to talk about college and dorms and a good social life. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to say, "Hey, John, if we don't get this process handled and she gets into the school, you're going to be looking at $30, $40, $50,000 a year in tuition and fees and housing. And I'm looking at your financials, and how are you going to afford that without taking on loans?" And what that means to you is that, bottom line, 6 months from now, if you don't do something, you're going to be sitting in front of a table with a bill in your hand with monthly payments at $1,200 a month. And I don't want that to happen at an 8% interest rate. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to fix that problem, if that's something that might be of value for you. Boom. And so now what I'm doing is I'm building value by speaking to the pain, because he moves away from pleasure and he moves towards what motivates him is moving away from pain versus moving towards pleasure. So again, that's how you build value. Number three is urgency. Now, the way you build urgency in a consultation so that it's persuasive enough to get them to give you money immediately is you have to differentiate between past pain, present pain, and then future pain. A lot of times my college planners, when I listen to their consultations, they're building pain, but they're building it like 2 years from now. They're saying, if you don't get this process handled, you're going to be facing a college expense next year or 3 years from now, or you'll have loan payments 4 years from now. And that's going to scare the prospect, but they'll say, well, hey, we have 2 years. Let's wait a year before we make a decision, honey, because that's our economic incentive, which is again to what? Maximize output or maximize input without spending a lot of money. So you focus on present pain. I'll give you an example. If I'm in a consultation and I know the pain of that family is their kid not going to a good school, then what I'm going to do to build pain in the present is not going to say, hey, if you don't get this process handled by next year, you'll be going to the wrong college. I'll say, if you don't get this process handled, next month, you're going to be sitting at your computer trying to look at 1,000 colleges, not having the right criteria, investing hours of your time and your energy and your resources looking at the wrong colleges and asking the wrong kinds of questions. And what is that going to mean to your senior year? What's that going to mean to you as parents? And what is it going to mean with after all that work in the next couple of weeks, then she'll get into a college and you'll start borrowing for college and it's the wrong school. So again, I'm building pain, but I'm doing it in a more present way. Because because remember, the only thing that will move a prospect towards pulling out their wallet is the belief that the value of the program is going to be better, the pain of giving you money is less intense than the pain of what will happen if they don't. And that's the bottom line, right? So again, you got to build sufficient urgency to buy now. Number four is money. Now, the objection of money is very often the number one reason why college planners complain about their jobs. They say these prospects don't have money. They can't afford the program. So here's the first thing that we need to do. You need to isolate whether or not, again, that's the true objection. And the second thing you need to do is understand if it is a question of philosophical there's a philosophical reason why they don't want to pay that much money. In other words, they don't believe in the convenience of your service. They don't believe in spending money. They have a negative association with spending money. In every purchasing decision they do, they don't like to spend money. Or you need to understand if they just literally don't have the money. Now, in the latter example, if they just don't have the money, that's not a sales problem. I cannot use persuasion and teach you how to get blood out of a turnip, okay? I have in the past, I have managed to get some families to open up business credit cards and personal credit cards, and I have one family that paid me $7,000 and they used 4 credit cards to do it. Now, I did that because I really did it, I believed it was the right decision for them, not because I did it unethically. But generally speaking, when you have prospects who are very low income, they can't afford it, that's not a sales problem, that's a marketing problem, which means you're not in front of qualified prospects. Qualified meaning they have enough money. That's one of the reasons why when I do my marketing, I would rather spend $5 on a mailer that puts me in front of a very affluent prospect than to spend 50 cents on a mailer that puts me in front of a broke prospect, because my goal isn't to get clients, my goal is to make profit, and there's a difference between what those two consumers can do for you. But given this training segment, going back to this example of this philosophical issue, now that's a tough one. In my experience, what I've always done in order to persuade someone to give me money who philosophically is opposed to the idea of giving money is to understand their buying strategy and then to work my services into their buying strategy. So the guy says to me, hey, you know what, Philip? I like it. Everything sounds good. $4,000 is just too much money. I want to do installments. And I don't offer installments. I'm not a big fan of installments. So what I might do is I might compromise here a little bit. I'll say, I'll tell you what we can do. You sound like you want to do it. Is that correct? Yeah, I want to do it. Great. So I'll tell you what. You want installments. I don't want to do installments. Let's meet somewhere in the middle. You want 6 months. You want 6-month installments. What I can do for you is, why don't you pay me half up front, and then we'll do the next second half over, let's say, maybe 2 months or 3 months. And that way you can test drive out the program and make sure it's something that you want to do. And then what you have to then do is to then learn the skill of negotiation, which is an entirely different topic that we can look at later. But again, understanding the philosophical approach to how that prospect spends money, and then trying to work it into some kind of agreement is the best way to handle that question of money. And now the last one here, but oh, by the way, before I go to the last one, is the number one way to overcome the objection of money is to attract prospects that have it and that like spending it. And this is why when I talk about my marketing, is I'll only market to families who have already invested high fees for other services that are in the same affinity, because it decreases the probability of you running into that objection later on. Okay, last one is just authority, right? The number one way to overcome this objection is you got to make sure everyone is in the office at the same time. Everyone there is listening. Everyone there, husband, wife, kids, everyone, and get them all on the same page. When I do consultations, I make it mandatory for everyone in the family to show up to my office. If they don't all show up to my office, then I don't do the consultation, because I know I'm just blowing steam, right? If you're in a situation where you are just in front of the husband or just the wife or just the parents without the kid, is I've actually designed letters just for the husband, a letter just for the wife, a letter just for the kids, that are a recap of everything within the consultations. I immediately set up a follow-up consultation appointment before they leave, and I tell them to make their missing partner read this information and then show up to the consultation follow-up with all of them present. So that's one of the ways I handle that. So with that being said, guys, that is how you overcome objections. Let's do a quick recap. Step one is you first understand that objections are merely resistance towards making a decision or creating an action. We isolate the objection first. Once we know the real objection, then we go through our lessons on how we overcome that specific objections. And the best thing that you can do is to overcome the objection early on in your presentation through storytelling, so that you don't have to deal with them towards the end, where their guards are up and they're more likely to dismiss what you have to say. And with that being said, if you master these tools and these technologies, you're going to be one step closer to achieving seven-figure status as a college planner. If you haven't already, make sure you sign up for the Millionaire College Planner Blueprint, as well as you get started in Millionaire College Planner Coaching. I'll look forward to seeing you at our next segment. And until then, take care and best of luck.